What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Get Paid for Your Pad. I'm your host, Jasper Rivers, and today I have on the show Mr. Henry Bennett. He is the co-founder and CEO of YourWelcome, which is a guest engagement tablet, and they are in 15,000 properties. So it's quite an achievement. He's also recently launched a new product, a platform to automate guest engagement and cleaning called PropertyCare.com. And today we are talking about the ideal setup for smaller Airbnb hosts. So affordable technology setup for small Airbnb hosts. And when I say small, that means, let's say, 5 or less units. So we're going to dive all into that. So Henry, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us on. It's been a few years. Pleased to be back.
Yeah, it's been a few years. Last time we talked about YourWelcome, the tablet that you can use to really provide information and upsell services to your guests. Why don't you give us a quick update on YourWelcome?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we launched YourWelcome, God, nearly 5 years ago now. So we were, I think, probably last time we spoke, it was myself, my business partner, maybe 2 staff, and we were, running at this kind of new industry that was, everyone was getting into Airbnb, money was coming in, and God, yeah, it's been a journey. I think pre-pandemic we got up to close to 20,000 properties had our tablets installed. Obviously, the pandemic hit us like every tech company in the ecosystem, despite what some of them might tell you on podcasts. And it's been good. I mean, we've been very, very focused on, installing our tablets in properties, providing a great guest service, upselling services as a point of sale. And we're really excited to be talking about our new product that's launching, that's very focused on, automating your cleaning and maintenance services alongside a guest engagement platform. It's literally launching in about 2 weeks' time. So it's the 12th of October recording this. So it's launching 1st of November. We're rolling it out for free to all of our current subscribers. So I'm not sure exactly the numbers, but we'll definitely become the top 2 kind of property care platforms in existence overnight. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
Awesome. So before we dive into the technology side, I would love to get your thoughts. I know you're pretty connected in the industry. You go to a lot of events, and you talk to a lot of people. Also, of course, you have a lot of short-term rental Airbnb hosts as clients. What are your thoughts on sort of like how the pandemic changed the short-term rental industry and what to expect for the next couple of years?
So I think it depends on where you're located. So we have 80% of our tablets in America, and really America didn't really stop. They had quite an interesting sort of pandemic strategy. So domestic travel was huge. Obviously, it locked out a lot of international travelers. And actually, I think they probably had 2 months of disruption, then saw record levels of occupancy, as opposed to a lot of countries in Europe that rely on, for example, British tourists that have been locked out. So I think there's been quite a disparity between the two. But the overriding thing that we've kind of seen is that, I think property managers are looking obviously to reduce costs, and part of that is reducing their tech stack. And then the other big trend that we've seen, and it's everywhere, is that cleaners and maintenance staff are at a premium. So, I was down in Devon in the UK, and they were like, this is an absolute nightmare. And the same is true in the US, record occupancy, more properties coming on, but they can't get the staff. So I think we're going to see, and everyone's talking about this, that there was so much money came into the industry that was very focused on what we call the sexy bits of the industry, like dynamic pricing, guest experience, all that stuff. But I think now the attention is really turning to sort of the nuts and bolts of property management, which ultimately, as we know, is communicating with guests, getting them into the property and making sure that property is clean and you have a consistent quality across your portfolio. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see going forward.
Yeah. Yes, and what are your thoughts on sort of the demand that we're seeing? I was just I saw this interview by Brian Chesky, and where he's talking about there's a revolution in travel and people have more flexibility, and there's going to lead to a huge boom in short-term rentals. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, I think, he's obviously in a position where that's correct. I think we're going to see a massive boom in travel again. I mean, there's a term that everyone's talking about, which is revenge travel, having not been allowed to travel for a while. I think it's interesting. I think one of the challenges that we're seeing, particularly in Europe and the UK, is are we going to see a return for international travel like we used to, or is domestic travel going to continue to see the spikes that we've seen? And it's interesting, like, you know, there's record bookings, for example, of UK domestic travel, but I think that overall, all governments around the world pretty much message the world that short-term rentals are safer than hotels because they open them sooner than hotels. And I think that's a key thing for this industry, because ultimately everything around this COVID pandemic as we sit now is about perception. What's your perception of risk? And I think that, you know, I think for most people, they do understand you're staying in a self-contained, isolated unit. You probably are safer than mixing in a hotel where there's hundreds and hundreds of people. And I think that can only be positive for the industry.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. So let's dive into the topic for today. So this is really interesting. What I see in our student groups, and we have people that have one listing all the way up to 200-300 in our mastermind. And what I notice is, you know, when you have smaller than 5 units, it's still pretty manageable without a ton of technology.
Yeah,
right? It's
agreed.
like you don't necessarily need a full-on PMS. Now, as you start growing like 10, 15, it becomes pretty challenging. I would say once you get to like 2025, you pretty much need, you know, all the different tools that are out there. You know, you need your automated pricing, you need your PMS, you need your, you know, your cleaning management. But there's this interesting point where, you know, you can still manage it by yourself, just kind of on Airbnb, but you could use the help, some help, right? So sounds like you have that's a problem that you recognized, right? And that you found a solution for that. So I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, well, look, I think the reality is, as the sort of tech industry around vacation rentals has evolved, and it has in the last since we started. I mean, I think at the VRMA in New Orleans there was like 250 exhibitors. I mean, it's extraordinary. But I think we're all guilty where. Not necessarily guilty, but the reality is most people like me that take venture money, private equity money, you need scale. So what happens is you build your products for people that have 200 to 500 units. Then what happens is that you sell those products to people that don't have 200 to 500 units, that they're amazing, we don't ultimately need them. So we identify, particularly during COVID, that ultimately there is a gap in the market, as you've correctly identified, where people are just about coping, right, with very little tech, WhatsApp, Excel, possibly a channel manager, but ultimately they're not ready to commit to a PMS. And we all know what's gone on in the PMS world is PMS have got very expensive for various reasons, right? So I think that's a gap we're very interested in. But ultimately, when people go into Airbnb, typically they go in for two reasons. They want to change their lifestyle, or they want to scale and grow a business. But both of those things mean that you cannot be bogged down in manually responding to guests in the guest communication. Like ultimately, you know, at the start, everyone's really excited. You're renting your first place, you leave a bottle of wine, you want to talk to them about the experiences, all that stuff. You get past that and you're suddenly sitting there with 5 properties, you got these bookings and you're drafting emails. It's an absolute nightmare. And the second thing is cleaning and maintenance, right? So what happens is you're managing cleaners, it's a nightmare. You're on WhatsApp, you're trying to recruit them, they don't turn up, etc., etc. So what's really interesting is that with all the money that's come into vacation rental, most of the money has gone on what we call the sexy bits of the industry: dynamic pricing, guest experience, etc. And I think what we're seeing post-pandemic is more focus on the actual reality of property management, which is communicating with guests and actually making sure the property is clean and has a consistent feel. So with our new platform, PropertyCare, it basically does those two things. So it basically focuses on being able to set up and automate tasks, assign them to cleaners, have a bird's eye view of every property. Has every task been assigned? Has it been cleaned? Then the other thing it does, it enables you to set up an automated email flow to make sure the booking confirmation, take deposits, rental agreements, how do you get in, door codes, etc. And then also bolted on is you get a free mobile number to be able to use SMS and WhatsApp as well, which is increasingly becoming a pretty good thing. And, you know, like the price point is basically $2, £2 or €2 per month for a property. So we're firmly sort of placing it in that thing of either, there's basically like a couple of customer types we're aiming at. Either you're sort of at that point where you're not quite at PMS, but you need to kind of get there and it solves a lot of those problems. Or you basically have what we sort of class as like an entry-level PMS, and their focus is on accounting and channel management, but maybe not on, you know, task management and, you know, really good guest communications and SMS. or indeed you've got a very expensive PMS and actually you want to downgrade a few modules to reduce your cost and bolt us on. And that's kind of where we sit. But obviously today we're going to talk about sort of kind of more companies that have maybe 1 to 5 or 5 to 10 that are looking to scale, or maybe not scale, but actually run it more efficiently so they can enjoy sitting on the beach or in Panama City. Either way. So yeah, that's where we sit basically.
Did you say that there's a phone number? Like, you get a phone number?
Yeah, so it's basically like you have a few options when you join our system. So either you can port a mobile number. So say, for example, you've got a mobile number that you use to text your guests that maybe a few of your team rotate a number. You can port that into our system, or including the price, you can basically buy a mobile number and then we manage all of your SMS in our platform. Multiple people can log in and they can all respond, and you have a unified inbox where you can see a complete history of communication.
That's pretty cool. So is there an extra charge for the mobile number?
It's including the $2, €2 a month.
Well, hold on a second. Like, we have Ring Central, and I don't know how much we're paying, but we're paying way more than that.
Yeah, correct. Well, the thing, not only that as well, it's unlimited texts. So I think that alone. I mean, we are like we believe what we're offering is a pretty comprehensive system for someone to basically manage their properties before they go to a PMS and beyond, essentially.
So just to dive into the phone number aspect, because I'm really I'm really curious now. I feel like we're overpaying for something. But so basically, if I sign up for PropertyCare, I get a phone number and I can text people. Correct. Without any extra charges.
Correct.
Is that international texting?
Yeah, so how it works is we use a company called Twilio. You probably know them. They're a massive global company. So they provide a text messaging number. There's a few countries, but not the main countries. So US, mainland Europe and UK. It's a two-way text messaging. If you've got a guest from taking a random country, Azerbaijan, you might not have a two-way text, but all the main countries, it's included in the price, no extra costs.
Can you make phone calls with that?
No, it's text.
Okay. It's only texting. Okay, yeah. All
Correct.
Right. Well, that makes sense then. It's still good, still good value for money. Don't get me wrong, but
Sure.
But yeah, sure. We need to be able to make phone calls with that as well. So that's why we're using Ring Central. But cool, man. That sounds pretty interesting. So talk to me a little bit more about compared to a PMS, right? Let's just say, name some examples. Hostfully, which we were using, Your Porter, or more expensive platforms like Guesty. Like what do you cover versus the PMSs?
All those PMSs you mentioned, we integrate with. So that we're not a PMS. We're not competing with PMSs. We complement the PMS systems. But what we do is also provide a bridge. So as we said at the beginning, what those platforms do is what a PMS does as a heartbeat. We always call it the heartbeat of a short-term rental business. What they do at the heart is manage your channel management to make sure you don't get conflicting bookings, and it manages your accounting. That's the two things that every PMS needs to do, right? After that, depending on where you go, is to take Guesty, huge investment. They cover everything, but broadly, the industry at one point was going, one platform could do everything. Whereas what we know now is most people are realizing that for every aspect of your business, you need the best in class technology, right? So a PMS, I mean, I'm not going to name any names, I don't know, but for example, a lot of PMSs you might not be able to customize your email flows to brand it so it looks like it's coming from you. You can't integrate your email so it looks like and it responds to you, as an example. So you might still want to use MailChimp for your marketing campaigns. You don't need to do that anymore. You can use it with us. But I think we see ourselves very much complementing PMS if you're using one. But at the starter, as I said to you in the beginning, is that if you're going to go, I need a PMS because I need to automate my guest messaging and I need a really high quality cleaning and maintenance automation platform that can assign tasks to cleaners. We do that, and we do that very well because we're not spending tech money on the hard bits, which is accounting, channel management, all the things that are very, very challenging and continually changing. Different tax laws, different platforms come on every day, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where we are in that ecosystem. So
for example, if I have free listings, but I'm on Airbnb and I'm on VRBO, then I would need a PMS in addition to what you're offering.
Well, you might do, or you might use, for example, you might just take a channel manager like Rentals United to manage that conflict. You can import the iCals, so you can manage your calendar, etc. But what we're not is we're not a channel manager, so that's a portion of it. But we have seen, and you'll know this yourself when you probably started out, lots of people with 5-10 properties don't use a channel manager, right? I mean that is a reality, right? I mean, so there's a lot of customers, because channel managers come with a cost, obviously. So you are able to do that, as you know.
Well, there's also, I mean, there's a lot of people who are just on Airbnb, they don't really need a channel manager necessarily.
Correct. Exactly. But whether you need a channel manager or not, we all know 5 properties, guest booking, cleaners, 5 properties enough to be a nightmare running it off WhatsApp and just 5 calendars, right? We know this. And I think we're a very good solution for that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm definitely in the category of hosts who will onboard with technology before most people would do. Like even with a couple listings, I remember when this is years ago, when those PMSs started to come on the market. I mean, the larger one have always kind of existed, right? I think there's some PMSs that have existed before Airbnb was even on the market, right? But sort of like the newer ones, the more affordable ones, I started using them with like 2 or 3 properties, just because even then it already saves time.
But interesting though, like we see quite a big distinction between kind of like, so you're probably in the same boat as me, right? So if you run a company that's venture funded, how you run a business is very different from if you run a lifestyle business. So we often have conversations with property managers. We're like, how much does it cost you if you have to call out and go to the property? And some property managers are like, nothing. It doesn't cost me anything because I do it. And you're like, but that you're not really running a business at that point. What you're doing is your time. So you're back into being like a wage slave. So that I think is an education process as you scale. And I think ultimately people realize that if all they're doing is managing guest comms and cleaners and call outs, ultimately they haven't got the lifestyle they thought they would have at the beginning. And I think that's the big sort of different point. But equally, they might not have enough revenue to suddenly commit a portion of their top line to top tier PMS, or indeed pay the listing fee because they're not sure if they're going to hold on to properties. So I think that is a material issue within the industry that exists, right? And I think also as well, broadly, look, we're guilty of this with the tablet as well, is that if you want to create a tech business in the vacation rental ecosystem, you have to create your tech for big companies, because venture needs you to scale. And it's difficult to scale with 5 units. However, I would say what I like about the 5 units is that people with 5 units usually get to 15, 20. So suddenly your cost of acquisition goes downwards. But I think it's an underserved part of this industry.
Got it. Yeah. I've noticed that too. Talking with all the technology companies, they'll prefer to onboard somebody who has like 500 properties, because that's a lot less work than onboarding 500 people with one listing, right?
Of course. But on the flip side, it's quite interesting, because when you look at the valuations of your business, to say if you only go after companies that are huge, obviously then the concern comes, if you try and exit, that actually a lot of your portion of revenue is actually in the hands of like 10 customers. Whereas if you have hundreds of 5 units customers, you obviously just, you have your revenues proportioned accordingly. So I think with PropertyCare, for example, I went down to Devon in the UK last week. I saw 5 property managers, 4 of them have signed up instantly, and all of them are in that zone of under 50 units. They've had an amazing couple of years because of domestic travel. They've grown rapidly. But now they don't really quite know where to look. And one of the recurring things that we often see as well is that they're like, we know if we go with these companies, the support's not going to be great because they're so focused on like the top level, right? So, I think there is a gap in the market for that.
Yeah. It sounds interesting. Where can people go if they want to check it out?
Yeah, so if you go to propertycare.com, you'll be there. So and then essentially there you can book a demo. You'll be able to buy directly off the site as of November. And I think like in Europe, particularly in the US, like the term property care and understanding the importance of managing cleaners, automating the assigning is now real. I think in Europe now, I think it is a new genre of product, in the sense that there's property managers and there's people who do one thing. Whereas what this product does, it manages the 2 key things until you get to the point of that channel manager PMS thing. So it's a new genre of product in Europe, probably. And then the other thing I think is quite interesting as well is the price point. So particularly in America, people are used to paying a lot more money for SaaS model PMSs. Whereas, like, for example, if you're in Europe and you're paying, just an example, say you're paying 15 euros per property for your PMS. If you've got something that bolts on that's like 10 euros, 8 euros, that's such a large percentage of your main cost. So we've deliberately pitched it to make sure it's a very small percentage of your tech stack costs. And also you can get rid of MailChimp, WhatsApp, mobile phone, all that stuff that is also reduced as well.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I like, and something that I'm learning right now actually is, because I'm managing the units that Eric and I just purchased, and I used to always focus on properties outside the US. Like, this is the first time that I'm really getting into the trenches in the US market, and what I notice is people are not using WhatsApp as much as other countries, right? So all my other properties, I've always really relied on WhatsApp for communication, but in the US, most people use texting, right? Which is something that we don't really do that anymore in Europe, right? Like, I don't send text messages.
Right? Sadly, I'm 42, so I still use SMS. However, I completely agree. SMS is like the de facto. Also, interestingly, in mainland Europe as well, I booked a villa for my family in Mallorca in the Balearic Islands for this summer. All of it SMS, everything was SMS. And I think also, look, I mean, you've probably seen, and I've seen over the last year, my inbox, every time I come in the morning, I've got so much spam in my inbox now that I think that email communication is becoming harder with people. Whereas I think SMS is like an instant, you see it, okay, I'm going to engage, particularly the pre-arrival stuff. Because I think that when people have spent a lot of money booking their vacation, people are engaged, right? They're excited, they're engaged. So all you got to do, if you SMS them, you're going to get response quickly. And as every property manager knows, if you need to get the ID in some countries, mandatory, if you need to get deposit, rental agreements, you just want to get it done quickly. So in our system, you can set triggers up where send an SMS or an email. If they don't respond, you haven't approved it, it automates the next one. So you're not having to constantly check, and you have like a bird's eye view of who's checked in, who's signed, is the cleaner assigned, is it clean, is it ready, etc. So which I think is pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, well, I'm finding that SMS is the best way to communicate with guests, especially in the US. And that's something that I realized pretty early on as I started hosting on Airbnb. Is in the beginning I was just communicating through the Airbnb messaging system, but what I noticed is, just like you mentioned, people don't always check those messages. And those emails kind of get lost because you get so many emails from Airbnb. Your inbox just fills up with notifications from Airbnb. So I noticed that too. If you send somebody, a WhatsApp or a text message, you typically get a response like real quick as well. So, so that's definitely something. And I feel like it builds a bit more of a personal relationship too when you're speaking to people over message or WhatsApp.
Correct. So I think also the advantage of having all of your SMSs combined with all of your emails in one unified inbox is what you can then do is you have a whole history of like your communication. So one of the other things that PropertyCare.com does is it has a proper guest CRM. So I'll give you an example, right? You got all these bookings coming in. You actually know quite a lot about these guests because like you probably have SMSs, I can't wait because I want to play golf or whatever it is that they're doing. You can then start tagging those guests going, this person's come for golf, this person's come for a special occasion, this one, et cetera, et cetera. So what then happens is that you can use our platform for post-stay marketing. But instead of just sending out all the usual, like, hey, book direct, you start segmenting it. They like golf, you take on a new property near a golf course, you can start actually like personalizing that process a little more. And I think that the other thing that we can do as well is that we have a system in the platform where you can set up a flow for a landing page. So for example, you can set up an advanced check-in process as an example. So you can get the ID, the non-paying guest's email address and ID as well if you're required. Because one of the things when I entered the vacation rental industry, which I thought was really interesting, having set up and sold several businesses, is that weirdly the focus in vacation rentals is the paying guests, not non-paying guests, which is really weird because, Jasper, you must have had this because I have. You go away with your mates, one of your mates gets stuck having to put his credit card down, and it's usually the guy who has to do this every time, but he's no more of a customer than I am, right? But the property manager only focused on that guy, but actually he needs all of our email addresses because we've all stayed in his product. We're all customers of him. And I think our platform is very effective at doing that as well. And I think that's a trend we're going to see as well, where the focus doesn't become on who's the paying guest. It's about anyone that stays in his property is a future direct booker, right?
Yeah. 100%. And that's, there's technology that is pretty interesting. The Wi-Fi companies like StayFi are really, capitalizing on that, the idea of, getting all the guest information, right? Versus just a booker. I mean, to give you an example, our village in Idlewild, we can sleep a total of 26 people in our 4 cabins, right? So if we get the email address or the contact telephone number of 26 people or 4 people, right? It's 4 cabins. That's a big difference.
Right. It's huge. And I think that's, I think that's one of the things that underserved. Like, we often talk on demos about CRMs. People don't use them. They're like, oh, I've got a list of people, but, and then they just send a bulk email. Whereas we all know, like with email marketing, the world has become more sophisticated. So inevitably it will catch up. But we all know that if you've got a load of bookers, you just bombard them with book direct. It's just noise, right? Whereas if you can personalize it, make sure that it's tailored, I think you're going to see an uplift. And, we all know once a pandemic people recover from it. People during the pandemic just cared about occupancy, so book direct, all that stuff people were less concerned about, but it's going to come back again, right? And you got to get ready. The sooner you do it, the sooner you build up your CRM, the better chance you've got of, owning your own customer. Because we know in most businesses, if you don't own your own customer, that business is not sellable in the future.
Yeah. I remember when I started helping manage the kitesurf spot in Egypt. I started doing that a couple of years ago. And that was one of the first questions I asked my business partner there is, do you have any contact details of all the guests that have been coming? Because that place existed for a long time. And he was like, yeah, I've got a list of emails and phone numbers. So I asked him to give it to me, and there was over 1,000 contacts in there. And I asked him, like, have you ever contacted anybody? And he's like, no, I've never really done anything with it, but we take down the information. Well, that's a pretty powerful marketing tool.
It is. But the reality is, if you're looking, it depends what people try and do. But if you've got an ambition to scale your short-term rental business and get acquired, there's no question you're going to get a premium if your percentage of direct booking is over 50%. Because basically, anyone that's acquiring a business, like any business, looks at it going, you have a business that has a recurring revenue stream, that you're not reliant on an OTA that may or may not change their algorithm at any point, right? So you're going to get a premium. And that's, that's one of the things that you don't hear, like, and I think it's maybe because the conferences, like the main OTAs are sponsoring it. You don't really hear that much, but that is a reality of any business, right, around the world, whatever you're in. If you own your own customer, your business is worth more than if you rely on another platform to deliver like your leads. That's just a reality.
So what's the best, in your opinion, what's the best way to get the contact details, like the email and the telephone number of every single person that stays in our unit?
So in my view, is to send an advanced check-in like an airline, right? So basically, once you paid your money, people typically do what they're told, right? So I'll give you an example, Jasper, right? People check out of hotels. You actually don't need to check out of your hotel. If you walk out, they have your credit card on file, they will just bill you. But people queue to check out. It blows my mind, right? So the same's true that if you basically say to people, in advance of checking in, you need to go through this web check-in, which means I need to get your email, I need to get the emails of the other guests, and maybe need ID or whatever it is. People will do it because they don't know if they don't do it, what happens. That's a human nature of like how it works. So my view is when someone's just paid a load of money, everyone's excited. That is the point to get their emails, because once they get in a property, they're on holiday. And when people are on holiday, rightly so, they don't want to hear from you. They just want to get on with their holiday. And once they left, they don't want to think about that because they're now back at work. So for me, it's arrival. You need to get it early.
Yeah, understood. Agreed. Okay, awesome, Henry. So let listeners know one more time if they want to try out your new platform. What's the pricing?
Yep. So if you're interested in automating all your cleaning and maintenance, assigning cleaners, you want to automate all of your emails, also get a free mobile number to SMS anywhere around the world. You go to www.propertycare.com. You sign up on there. It's £2, $2, €2 per property per month. And then I genuinely believe we're going to deliver the best value in the industry. And, for the money that it is, it's a big product.
Awesome. Congrats on your new venture.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see where you're going to take it in the next couple of years. So let's stay in touch.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to the listeners, thanks for listening. And we'll be back with another episode later this week. So I hope to see you there.